Can you believe it? We're already in double digits. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. This week, the UFC travels to Mother Russia, and we've got a card full of names that I'm going to have a real hard time pronouncing, so buckle in. This one's going to get interesting.
Qote, bashi, botinki. Those cannot be your only shoes. What am I saying? It's Russia. I bet people come from miles around just to have their picture taken in those.
As usual, we're going to start our episode off with a quick recap of last week's events and UFC 236. Holy crap, let me tell you, that's why I do this podcast. Weekends like last week are exactly why I love the sport of mixed martial arts. That main event and co-main event were just incredible, absolutely mind-blowing. I'm so sad to say that we're coming off of a losing week. We did go down minus 2.39 units on the picks from last week, but wow, I can't even be mad. We just got to sit down and enjoy mixed martial arts at the absolute highest level for 2 straight 5-minute rounders. And oh, if you're not a fan after watching last week, or if you just listen to the show for the picks and you're a gambler and you like to throw money on and check the results later, please do us all a favor. Go back and watch last week's main event and co-main event. Boy, did they put on a show. That being said, we did make some mistakes last week, and I'm going to go ahead and own up to that first and foremost. We started our night off with Curtis Millender. He was facing Belal Muhammad, and I knew a bunch of people who were actually on Belal Muhammad, and they got him right when the line dropped as an underdog, about plus 125, plus 130, and that was the move. That was absolutely the move to get Belal Muhammad as an underdog. But if you missed the underdog line, I felt like we had some value going with the underdog on the flip side. However, Curtis Millender, he was hungry to get back in there. He really wanted to erase that win, and that emotion was kind of what I was counting on in this one. But he does not have the takedown defense to be able to pull that off against a guy like Belal, apparently. Belal is not as good of a grappler as some of the guys that he's faced. So I thought with the edge of him really trying to get back in there and really erase that last loss, and then Belal not being up to par with some of the other people he's faced, I thought he might be able to edge out a win or maybe even clip his chin and get a knockout. That didn't pan out too well, so I'm going to go ahead and apologize for that one. Betting Curtis Millender in that spot, we probably should have just passed, or we should have really been on the side with everybody else and taken Belal Muhammad. Wilson Hayes, what are you going to say about that one? I mean, it was, I think, number 5 and number 6 in their division ranked against each other, and he got a scramble early on. He got the takedown. He got it to the ground. His opponent got right back up and then knocked him unconscious. It did not look like those guys belonged in the same cage together. I really thought it was going to be a closer fight. The only thing that we can take from that is we did beat a line movement. Now, those of you who aren't deep into betting, those of you who are just mostly into the MMA side of things, or we're still kind of, counting you as a casual or new fan at this point, line value is when you get a better number than somebody else did. So basically, we took the bet on Wilson Hayes at plus 155. He closed at, I think, a plus 110 or plus 120 underdog. So that's a decent chunk of money that we would have made that other people are not making if he wins that fight. And professional sports bettors, to them, that's value. So we're going to go ahead and say that we still got a little something out of that fight, even though we didn't win our bet. We made a good bet when we made it because other people didn't get the number that we did. So little grain of salt there that we can kind of sprinkle on that loss. That one was unfortunate. I don't think really anybody knew the level of difference between those two fighters until they actually got into the cage together. I knew a lot of people who were on Wilson Hayes for that fight as well. Next, we had a nice little score with Max Payne Griffin. We got a little assistance on that one. His opponent grabbing the cage and getting a point taken away. That really helped solidify us on that one. And it got a little dicey there at the end. I think that may have made the difference. But you know what? I will take it. We got a plus 105 underdog there. We finally got on the board. I thought we were going to be trucking at that point. I sent out that parlay on Twitter. And I felt so good about that parlay. I really thought we were going to hit the degenerate parlay this week, and it really pissed me off that our next fight was Jalen Turner, and boy did he shit the bed. There's really no other way of putting it. I I really think that was still a good bet. I mean, looking back on it, I had every reason to believe that Jalen Turner was going to get it done in that fight. And even watching the fight, I thought it was going to be maybe a split decision. I have no idea how it was a unanimous decision against Jalen Turner straight across the board. I don't know. I mean, there was some bad, questionable judging at UFC 236 in my opinion. So I don't want to call that a bad pick. I actually kind of like our pick on Jalen Turner. He just didn't pan out that night. It was close to a pick'em price, which means really you're locking two human beings in a cage. Anything can happen on any given night. He could have won that night, but he didn't. And unfortunately, I was more confident in him than I guess I should have been, and that broke our parlay, which really sucks because all three other legs of the plus 700 parlay came through. So really hurt to lose a straight bet on Turner, who I was very confident in, and then also to have that be the bet that broke the parlay. I was really upset about that. Next, we had potentially another bad bet on my part. Ovince St. Preux came in against Nikita Krylov, and I gotta tell you, when we were watching this fight, I was sitting on the couch next to my father-in-law, and I turned to him and I said, Ovince St. Preux is off. The moment I saw him, I wish I had it videoed so I could go back and show you guys that I'm not making this shit up. I looked over at him and I said, there's something wrong with OSP. He did not look as cut up physically as he normally does. Normally he comes in a little bit better shape than that. He didn't have that killer instinct look in his eye. He just did not look like he wanted to be in that cage whatsoever. Now, I still feel like we actually almost got the job done. He got Nikita Krylov to the ground and I thought it was going to be over. He looked like he had a couple of opportunities to stay on him. And then one more time, he just was not on that night. He slipped right off him. He left Nikita Krylov so many openings to make space and to get up, and then he just kind of rolled off the top of him. He could have pinned him down and laid on top of him, done some ground and pound. I mean, he was in a great spot and just straight gave it up, and that was really frustrating for me to watch, because as soon as he messed that up, I knew the fight was over. I knew he wasn't getting it back to the ground again. I knew he was done on the feet, and he was just absolutely gassed. The fight was over as soon as it got back up from that takedown. So unfortunately, that was a bad pick, and I honestly believe that maybe he was a USADA victim. USADA is the anti-doping agency, and they recently caught TJ Dillashaw, who popped for EPO, and it's a big-time enhancer. And maybe OSP is one of those guys that got a little spooked, you know? The timing would line up. If somebody big, a big name like TJ gets caught and banned for 2 years from the sport for something like that, maybe he saw that and he edged off. And if he was taking those vitamins, then, he probably edged off of those, and that could have hurt his training, hurt his conditioning, and led to what we saw. You know, the other thing is, I don't want to accuse him. Maybe he was just sick. You know, we see fighters get sick and then they're unable to do cardio for weeks at a time, and they really have bad performances in a fight because of stuff like that. So you never know, but it really does not look like a good bet in hindsight. So I was a little upset about that one. Grant came through for us well, though. And you know what? I got to tell you, at this point, I thought the MMA gods just straight hated me on all levels, because Grant, first off, looked amazing in the fight. Everything looked fantastic. But then he tore his freaking bicep. This is another one where I really wish I had a camera on me at all times, because I looked at my father-in-law and I went, oh shit, he tore his bicep. It was at the end of round 2. Sure enough, he gets to his corner, sits down, looks at his coach and goes, Coach, I tore my bicep. Like, I nailed that one. And it was really unfortunate, because against a guy like Joban, who is just so competitive, he's one of those guys you can just never count out. When Grant tore his bicep, I really thought Joban was going to see it and take advantage of it. Grant surprised me at that point, though, by shaking it off. I mean, he even threw the arm with the torn bicep. He kept his right arm cocked. It was the right bicep, and I remember because he kept it cocked, and he didn't use it quite as much in the third round, which is to be expected, but he did continue to throw it, which kind of surprised me, and then also led me to believe that he was doing a good job of guarding that from Joban. Joban didn't have the opportunity to realize his opponent was hurt, so he did a real good job of that. And once again, we had some questionable judging. Joban got a 3-0 scorecard on the rounds. I don't know what judge was watching that fight. No way in hell did Joban win all 3 of those rounds. I think they got it right, 29-28 for Grant. Some people think it was closer than that. Some people actually think Joban won. I could understand if it went to a split decision and Joban got it or something. It was a very close fight, but we will take it. We got Grant, and that helped save us. And then, oh my God, the co-main event of the evening, Stylebender versus Kelvin Gastelum. Whoa. I mean, just mind blown on that one. They were 2-2 going into the 5th round. Each of them had their moments, and it was just a spectacular display of mixed martial arts. And Stylebender dug deep. Israel Adesanya in the 5th round said, I'm going to be the champion of this division. And he came out and put it on Kelvin like nobody has ever put it on Kelvin before. In fact, he damn near stopped the thing in the 5th round, and that was just so exciting to watch. It was an incredible fight, and we will cash that one and take it to the bank. I called Stylebender, and even though it was a close competitive fight, I honestly gotta say the only time I was worried about Stylebender losing was when Kelvin cracked the crap out of him. I want to say it was in round 3 when he hit him with that head kick and then decided to wrestle for some reason. That right there might be the reason we won the bet, was that Kelvin had a real low ring IQ moment and decided to grapple with Stylebender when he was hurt really badly. Now, it wasn't over by any stretch of the imagination. Stylebender showed his chin off, but that really could have gotten a lot hairier for us. As soon as he got out of that moment, I really felt like we had that locked up. I was very confident in Stylebender. I'm a little bit bummed I didn't decide to try and take the prop of Stylebender by decision, because the fight really played out almost exactly like I expected it to, but I was a little worried that something would happen, like in the 5th round when Stylebender really looked like he was about to end the fight. That's why we played him straight rather than playing him by decision. So I guess I can't get too choked up about that, because it damn near got finished and it almost didn't make it to the judges' scorecards in the end. Finally, the main event. We don't want to spend too much more time on this. I realize we're about 10 minutes into the show at this point, so I do apologize, but there's just so much to talk about from the last fight. I mean, maybe I got to start doing kind of a recap episode or something like that, something short, 15, 20 minutes instead of the usual 40-minute shows, going over the last week's events. If you guys are interested in me doing something like that, hit me up on Twitter, let me know. I would love to do something like that if we want to discuss kind of what happened a little more often. The Holloway and Poirier fight, again, went almost exactly like I expected it to. Poirier came out strong at the beginning, and Holloway really cranked it up in rounds 2, 3, and 4, and that's when I expected Poirier to wilt. And I gotta tell you, it happened a couple times. Poirier got his back to the cage, and he kind of looked around like he didn't know what was going on. He looked up at the clock. He looked exhausted. And Holloway started uncorking on him, unloading like he does. And that's exactly what I was looking for. I kept recalling that it was going to be a round 4 KO. But Dustin absolutely shocked me. He did not wilt every single time he did that, which is the moment that Max Holloway's entire game is based around. The moment that he waits for and really shines in a fight is right there, and he got 3 of them. 3 different times this happened throughout the fight, and I thought it was over. But Poirier ducked and covered and came back with a massive overhand straight shot and put Holloway on his heels again. Every single time this happened, somehow he dug deep and he found a second gear, he caught a second wind, and he hurt Holloway to back him off. I don't know how he did it. Literally everybody else on the planet doesn't seem to be able to do that, but somehow Dustin Poirier did. So props to everybody that took Dustin Poirier as an underdog. That was an incredible bet, and he really deserves that title. That fight was incredible, and what are you going to do? Shit happens. Unfortunately, we go minus 2.39 units, and that brings the overall record to 45-31 for plus 32.91 units. And honestly, going 5-3 this night could have been a lot worse. The fact that we didn't even go down 3 units on a night like this, I'll take it. We'll bounce back. We're going to bounce back strong. We're still up over 30 units on the podcast for 2019, so definitely still going strong. So let's get on into this. Without any further ado, we've spent a lot of time going over the last card, so I do apologize. Let's dive into UFC Russia. Real quick, I got to give a shout out to my mom. She just texted me, and apparently my dad is going nuts on the new ESPN app. He's got her watching the UFC Ultimate Knockouts show right now, and she's texting me about it. So shout out to Mom. Love you. I'm glad Dad's making you watch the stuff I like to podcast and bet on. So something to keep in mind on this fight, we've got a lot of really unknown Russian fighters in this case, and by unknown, I mean they've got a lot of fight experience, but a lot of times in Russia, it's a lot like Brazil, where you can get a bunch of guys who have fought a bunch of trash cans on their way up. They have real padded records, so you're going to see a lot of guys with 1 loss or undefeated, and it looks real nice, but they may not be up to stuff. Now, the only problem with that is on the flip side of that, you'll get these guys that are legit monsters, and they're going to be undefeated as well. So it's real hard to kind of pick through these fighters that we don't have a whole lot of information on. So we're going to tread very, very lightly, and we're going to have several passes on this card where you might think there's an opportunity, and I'm going to try and play it a little bit safe, especially considering we came off of a losing night. I'm going to give you some picks that I'm very confident in, but we're going to be very, very, very careful. That being said, we are skipping the first fight of the night, and we are moving right on to Gazmarud Antigulov facing Michael Oleanchuk. And you know what? You may remember Michael Oleanchuk, because that's the guy who I had a hard time pronouncing his name last time. This is Michael Lord. We call him Michael Lord because I cannot pronounce his last name. We took him inside the distance against Gian Villante back in February at UFC Fight Night 145, and we cashed on that one hard. He's coming in here again to face Antigulov. Now he's looking at a 13-2 record as opposed to his previous 12-2 record after winning by knockout. And he's facing Antigulov, who's another one of these Russian-type monsters with a record of 20-5. 20-5, except his last fight in the UFC, he got knocked out stiff by Ion Cutelaba. Now, Ion Cutelaba is a fighter that I'm pretty excited about myself. I'm a big fan of him. His fight name's the Hulk. He gets in there and his only goal is to cave the skull of his opponent in. And you know, it's that or bust, basically. If he's not going to knock you out, he usually ends up dropping the decision. But I'm a real big fan of his. He may not be the best, he may not ever win a title, but I like watching him fight. So his fight with Antigulov, he absolutely crushed him in the first round, and that raises a real red flag, because a guy like Michael Lord, he has gone through a couple of monsters already here in the UFC himself. He took out Khalil Roundtree, however, that was overturned to being a no contest by the Athletic Commission. Remember, we talked about him coming off of the drug suspension for popping hot in that one, and he came back against Gian Villante and won in the first round handily. So basically what we've got is one fighter who's coming off of a real tough concussive loss against another fighter who's proved that he was not running on the juice alone and is 13-2. I really think that Michael Lord is a guy who could be a future title challenger. He's one of those guys with a real high ceiling, and Antigulov is a guy who maybe one of the ones with a padded record. We're not really sure that he is really UFC caliber just yet. He also has a real solid submission game. Actually, he's got 15 submission wins. 75% of his wins are by submission. And I do not think that he's going to get a guy like Michael Lord to the ground. So I can really see a path to victory here for Lord. He can win this thing by decision by just kind of wrestle boxing, keeping it standing, sticking and moving. He also can win this thing by knockout. I do not see him engaging in the grappling match. And if he does, he's going to be in top solid control and really make it tough for a guy like Antigulov to get the submission. I do like Michael Lord here in this spot. However, the bookies have caught on. We're only going to get the magic that we got from them last time once. The inside the distance prop is not worth it in this case, unfortunately. Lord to win inside the distance is minus 153. Playing him straight, he's a minus 200 favorite across the board. So unfortunately, there's just not enough value to take him inside the distance, although I do think that he does win inside the distance. What we're going to do is we're going to jump on at Pinnacle. We're going to take him minus 200, and we're going to use him in a parlay piece with somebody later on in the card. So go ahead and save that here, put a pin in it. We're taking Michael Lord at minus 200. We're not playing him straight. We're going to parlay him, so hang on to that for later. The next fight we're going to look at is Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Marcin Tybura. Now, this is another good fight where Marcin Tybura is a young up-and-comer. I mean, he's 33 years old, and in the heavyweight division, that's not super old or young, actually. Heavyweights we see have a much longer life in the fight game because the power generally is the last thing to go. So you can always knock somebody out even when the rest of your body starts failing. He's facing Shamil Abdurakhimov. And Shamil is 37 years old, so he's getting a little closer to that 40-year-old number that I like to start really fading people on, but he is not quite there yet. And these guys have a common opponent, which is something that I'm super interested in. They both fought Derek Lewis. Now, Shamil fought him back in 2016, and Tybura fought him most recently in 2018. The interesting thing here is that they both got knocked out by Derek Lewis. Now, that doesn't surprise anybody. The Black Beast pretty much KOs everybody. But Shamil Abdurakhimov actually lasted longer against him. He was knocked out in the 4th round when he finally started to lose his gas tank, whereas Marcin didn't really ever even get rolling, and the Black Beast knocked him out in round 3. Both guys have relatively good offensive and defensive striking, and actually both of them have a pretty solid grappling game. It's interesting because both guys are usually the offensive grappler in their fights. Neither of them really defend the takedown, so it's going to be interesting because both of them will be trying to take the other down, which is something that neither of them have really faced much over the course of their careers here. Now, Shamil Abdurakhimov has names like Andrei Arlovsky, Walt Harris, Anthony Hamilton, Timothy Johnson on his record, and we look over at Marcin Tybura, you see some of those names as well. Andrei Arlovsky, Derek Lewis, Timothy Johnson's on there as well. It's really interesting. They've got a very, very similar resume. Now, Marcin Tybura did lose a fight to Fabricio Verdum by decision, which means his defensive grappling checks out. He won against Stefan Struve in 2018 in his most recent fight, and that doesn't say a whole lot for me because Stefan Struve is officially retired, and he hasn't done a whole lot with anybody recently. Now, Shamil, on the other hand, he actually took the fight to Derek Lewis when they fought, and I found that super interesting. He waded in, especially in rounds 2 and 3. He really stepped in on Lewis and tried to fire back and hurt him a couple of times, and that's something that Marcin never really did. So what we're going to do here is follow my strategy where I like to take middle-of-the-road heavyweights and bet the dog. When two guys line up and it's very, very even, it's a very close matchup, the stats aren't that different, and neither of them have an outstanding factor that really makes me want to bet on them, you take the underdog. It's heavyweights. These guys could cave each other's skulls in at pretty much any point in time. Both of them have power. Actually, I take that back. I don't know how much power Marcin Tybura has. He hasn't really shown that type of one-punch knockout power. And Shamil Abdurakhimov, damn it, I hate that guy's last name. He's the one who, in my opinion, has a little bit more pop on his punches. He's also going to be the one, I think, that's going to be able to defend Marcin's takedowns. I believe that Shamil is going to control the pace of this fight. He's going to control where it takes place, and he'll wear on Marcin. Plus, you got to remember, we are in Russia, so we have to account for the home cooking that is the judges. I think if this fight is close on the judges' scorecards, it goes to Shamil. If anyone's going to knock anybody out in this fight, I think Shamil's going to be the guy to do it. Now, if Marcin gets on top of Shamil, maybe he gets him with some ground and pound or something like that, but we're getting dog money on Shamil, and I think we have a live dog on our hands. So we are going to take the plus 139 they're currently offering over at Pinnacle, and we're going to lock up a dog. The next fight on the card is Alexander Yakovlev versus Alex de Silva Cogillo, and I find this one really interesting. I'm going to gloss over it just really, really quickly because I know a lot of people on both sides of this one. Alexander Yakovlev is a fighter who comes from Russia, and he hasn't fought in 3 years, which is very, very interesting. He actually usually fights at 170 pounds. He's had kind of an up and down spurt in the UFC, but technically speaking, he's a pretty solid fighter. Alex de Silva, on the other hand, is 20-1. He's a really legit looking kid out of Brazil. And my instinct was to first bet Alex, except Alex fights at featherweight. So Alex is moving up in weight as a last-minute replacement to 155 pounds. He's a smaller guy that can make 145. He's fighting at 155 here against a guy who normally fights at 170 and is moving down. So you're getting a much smaller fighter moving up and a much larger fighter moving down. And the fact that Alex de Silva has been fighting only regional people, basically, this means this is going to be a large step up in competition for him. And you know me, I like to fade people when they're taking that first big step up in competition. However, he seems really legit, so I'm going to caution everyone to just go ahead and pass on this fight. There are some really sharp people out there that are on Alex de Silva, and I really think may be a live dog in this place. He's sitting around plus 121, plus 130 at 5 dimes, but at the same time, I can absolutely understand with a guy like Yakovlev, who's got the experience, who's a veteran-style fighter with a lot of UFC experience, he might be able to grind this kid out, and he's only about minus 145, minus 150, so it is super close in my opinion, and it's also a reverse line movement type of situation. It looks like 53% of the money has come in on Yakovlev, and 49% has come in on Alex de Silva. However, the dog line line is getting shorter. Alex opened at plus 140. He's all the way down to plus 120 in some places. So just really be careful in this fight. I think the longer we go, the more money's going to come in on Alex de Silva. If this gets to a pick'em, I may take a poke on Yakovlev just thinking he's going to get it done, but I don't want to lay that price with him, and there's just way too many questions around this fight. So if anyone asks, that's my take on this one. That moves us on to the main card. We are done with the prelims, and the main card kicks off with Krzysztof Jotko facing Alen Amedovski. Alen Amedovski is an 8-0 undefeated fighter, stepping up to face Krzysztof Jotko. And Jotko's been in the UFC for quite some time, and he's in kind of a bad spot right now. He's on a 3-fight skid. He was looking like he was a pretty hot prospect. He only had 1 loss on his record prior to getting into the UFC, and then he ran into David Branch, Uriah Hall, and Brad Tavares. Now, the thing that scares me most about this is, first off, we saw what happened with David Branch the last time we talked about him. He's an absolute quit job. He dropped a split decision to David Branch. So now you can say, okay, well, that was 2017. That was 2 years ago. Branch was fighting, trying a little harder back then. And Krzysztof Jotko losing a split decision, well, that means it was close. It could have gone either way. Okay, I'll give you that one. The David Branch loss isn't necessarily so bad. However, right after that, he gets TKO'd by Uriah Hall. Now, Uriah Hall, he kind of TKOs everybody, right? Like, that's his thing. He's boom or bust. He knocks you out or he loses himself. So he caught Jotko. Okay, that's not so bad. Well, in 2018, he fights Brad Tavares. And this is where it gets dicey. Brad Tavares is a good fighter. I like Brad Tavares. He's very technically skilled. He is a great guy. But you know who Brad Tavares KOs? Nobody. Brad Tavares doesn't KO anybody, and he TKO'd Krzysztof Jotko in round 3 in 2018, and that was something that I just cannot forgive Krzysztof Jotko for. Brad Tavares only has 2 wins by KO TKO, and his first KO TKO win came all the way back in 2009 when he was just getting started as a pro. It was his 5th pro fight that he won by TKO, and he hasn't TKO'd anybody since. He's a decision machine. He does not have power in his repertoire. So the fact that he KO'd Jotko is a really bad sign. I have serious questions about Jotko's chin, and I have serious questions as to why Jotko is this big of a favorite in this damn fight. They've got Jotko currently lined at almost a minus 200 favorite. You can see him over at Pinnacle at minus 187. That's as low as you can get. Oh, my bad. Bovada's got minus 185. But basically, we're getting a dog price on this young kid, Alen Adamovski. Yeah, Adamovski. Alen Adamovski, who is 8-0 and has a 8-0 KO record as well. He's got 100% of his wins by KO. And his last couple of fights came off of Bellator against a 7-2 and a 5-1 fighter. So, I mean, the 5-1 fighter, his one is Alen Adamovski. So he's fighting other young up-and-coming serious prospects with good records. He's not facing cans on the regional scene completely anymore, and he's still winning by first-round KO. So the fact that we've got questions about Krzysztof Jotko's chin, this kid is in his home country. He's coming off of 8-0. He crushes everybody before the 1.5 round mark. We're going to ride the hot hand here. We're going to take Alen Adamovski because we can get him at plus 170 over at Bet Online. And I don't understand what's going on here. So we're going to roll with another big dog here. We're going to take Alen Adamovski at plus 170 to tap Krzysztof Jotko's chin and basically just knock him out of the UFC at this point because it doesn't look like he can make the cut. So it's funny because now that I'm running through this with you guys, I'm realizing just how many dogs I'm taking. Looking at this card, it seemed like it was going to be a huge favorites night and we were just going to have to lay the wood left and right, but we're taking a lot of dogs. Next up, we've got Roxanne Modafferi versus Antonina Shevchenko, and let me tell you, buckle up. We are going to take a serious roll of the dice on this one. We are taking my girl, the Happy Warrior, Roxanne Modafferi. Roxanne Modafferi is currently sitting right around plus 300. That's right. At 5 dimes, we can get her at plus 300. Shevchenko opened up as a minus 300, and people have just apparently been laying the wood on her because she's now sitting around minus 355, minus 365, and that is just completely bonkers, completely uncalled for. I do not understand. Now, everyone's going to look at it and go, oh, Roxanne Modafferi, she's 22-15. That's a terrible record. Antonina Shevchenko is 7-0. And oh, her last name's Shevchenko. Isn't her sister like the champion or something? And the answer to all those questions is yes, absolutely yes. But we're going to look a little closer than that. First and foremost, Roxanne's record is the way that it is because she's one of the pioneers of women's MMA. She has been fighting since the very beginning. She fought way before the UFC ever allowed women to fight, and she has been through the who's who of women's MMA. And I mean that quite literally. She's fought almost every single name you've ever heard of in women's MMA. So her losses are almost all to high-level people. And she gave away a couple in there, that's true. She is not the most athletic girl, but she's only been taking her strength and conditioning training seriously in MMA for the last couple of years. Antonina Shevchenko is primarily a stand-up fighter. She's only 7-0 in MMA because she just doesn't do MMA that much. She competes in striking matches, kickboxing, Muay Thai, things like that. And she actually took like I want to say a 2-year-long break from MMA. So here, listen to this. She starts her MMA career in 2002. She fights again in 2003 and 2005. She lays off for 12 years. She didn't fight again until 2017, and she fought twice in 2017 in MMA, then twice in 2018 in MMA. And you know what I saw? She has no ground game. She's a stand-up fighter, and she doesn't compete in mixed martial arts because she doesn't have half of what it takes to be a mixed martial arts fighter. Her sister is the better of the two. There's this weird thing in MMA where you've got two people who are related to each other that are both high-level fighters. One of them is the star, and the other one is so-and-so's brother, so-and-so's sister. Antonina Shevchenko is the other Shevchenko. We all know Valentina Shevchenko. Valentina Shevchenko is a star. She is legit. Antonina is the other Shevchenko. And I really see her win streak coming to an end here. I think Roxanne Modafferi, not only is she a live dog, but this line is straight insulting. We're getting massive amounts of line value here, and I think she's going to win by submission. Roxanne Modafferi's got plus 300. I'm going to lock that up right now, and I probably will sprinkle the submission prop when it comes out. Her inside the distance doesn't really give me enough incentive to play that because it's only at 450. 300 is plenty to roll the dice on an underdog this big, but what Shevchenko likes to do is she likes to clinch. She throws knees and elbows in the clinch with a heavy Muay Thai style. Roxanne Modafferi is going to be the shorter of the two fighters. I think she's going to be the physically stronger of the two fighters, and she's the one with the ground game. What she likes to do is trip, and Antonina Shevchenko is suspect to the trip. In fact, her takedowns early on in her career when she was on The Ultimate Fighter, when she was on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, she got tripped for a takedown exactly like what I'm talking about. Now, maybe they've gone back and fixed that, but we have not seen that fixed. And the only people that Antonina Shevchenko has fought are girls that do not have a legitimate ground game. Roxanne Modafferi has a legit ground game. She's very, very good on the floor. And I don't think Antonina Shevchenko can get up. If Roxanne gets her down once, I think the fight is over. And so I'm going to go ahead and roll the dice at plus 300 that Roxanne can manage to get a trip when Antonina clinches up with her to throw a knee. She trips her, she takes her down, and that'll be the end of the fight. We're going to roll with the Happy Warrior. Plus 300. Let's go, Roxy. Next up, we're headed back to the big boys. We're in the light heavyweight division where Ivan Shturkov faces Devin Clark. Ivan is 15-0-1. Devin Clark is 9-3-0. And the most fun aspect of this fight to me is that Devin Clark does not belong at 205 pounds. This is another one of those fights where one guy is going down and one guy is coming up. Devin Clark is a 185er. Look at him. Wait until you see him. He is a 185er. He's a 205 pounder from the waist down. And that's not a dick joke. He has some of the thickest thighs I have ever seen. The badonkadonk on this guy is ridiculous. Now, that's the only thing that makes him a 205er. When you look at him from the waist up, sure, he's muscular. Yeah, he's explosive. But you know what? He's just not that big. Ivan Shtirkov, on the other hand, is huge. The dude's shoulders are so broad. One shoulder is the size of my head. This guy's massive. And he's 15-0. He's one of those legit Russians. His most recent wins over Fabio Maldonado and Thiago Silva. He won by submission against Thiago Silva. And that's saying something. Thiago Silva is a former UFC fighter who got kicked out over some personal issues, but he was a legit black belt. And I say he is. Thiago Silva is a legit black belt. This guy also beat Antonio Bigfoot Silva back in 2015. And I know Bigfoot Silva had chin issues back in, towards the end of his career. So that's not really the biggest thing. But when you're talking about guys who have high UFC value names and experience, Ivan has it. Devin Clark, on the other hand, doesn't. And he's 3-3 in his last 6. He came into the UFC and dropped his first loss by KO against Alex Nicholson. And he lost to Jan Blachowicz. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, Jan's legit. But then he lost to Alexander Rakic by KO in the first round again. This guy has got chin issues, especially at 205. I mean, you think I've got some chin problems, maybe hang around at the lighter weight division where the guys don't hit as hard, but no, he's moving up to 205. Devin Clark is explosive, and that's where those thighs and butt that I was talking about before really comes into play. He's super explosive, but he doesn't really seem to have knockout power. He explodes and lands these big shots, but his opponents just eat them every time. He does explode in for big double leg takedowns, and that's kind of his path to victory. Is he likes to pin people up against the cage, he likes to grapple, and he's going to play right into Ivan's hands here, because Ivan is going to be a brick wall. When you get two guys that both like to wrestle, size matters, and that's just the truth of it. So Ivan is not going anywhere. There's no way Devin Clark's going to be able to put Ivan on his back and rough him up. I don't think he'll be able to control him against the cage either. Ivan has a legit submission game as well. So if he gets on top, he's going to pound Devin Clark into the mat, or he's going to take an arm or a neck and just take it home with him. Right now, you can get Shtirkov sitting at around 170 over at Pinnacle, but what we're going to do is we're going to count on the big-ass Russia to roll in here and crush Devin Clark, who is just a smaller man who is not on his level. We're going to take Shtirkov inside the distance at minus 107. And to quote the most famous Russian fighter of all time, if he dies, he dies. Up next, we've got another real interesting fight with heavyweights Sergey Pavlovich versus Marcelo Golm. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one because the line is just a little out of reach in my opinion. Marcelo Golm is 6-2, and he is just not great. He came in with a whole lot of hype surrounding him. He was 6-0. All by finish, got into the UFC and dropped 2 hefty decision losses. One against Timothy Johnson, the other to Arjan Bular. And neither of them are spectacular prospects in their own right. Sergey Pavlovich, on the other hand, came in at 12-0 and was TKO'd by Alistair Overeem in the first round back in November of 2018. Now, he is legit. He has shown some absolutely awesome fights on his record here, and the only reason that he's got a loss is because he ran into a high-quality fighter like Alistair Overeem. What the UFC is doing in this spot is they're trying to get this dude back on track. Marcelo Golm, it's pretty apparent that he doesn't belong in the UFC at this stage. Now, if he comes out here and he's made some serious adjustments since his last fight, maybe he'll prove me wrong. But Sergey Pavlovich, in my opinion, is a perfect parlay piece. If you're looking to do a larger parlay with 3, 4, 5 different people on it, he's sitting around minus 300 right now. I think he is an easy favorite, and I don't see the upset happening in this case. So Sergey Pavlovich is the pick. I'm not going to actually make him an official pick for the show. We're not going to lay any money on him. We're not going to parlay him. But if you're looking for some more action, I would take Sergey. And there's a decent chance that he gets it done, honestly, probably by TKO, but I'm not confident enough in him to actually make a bet out of it, and I'm sure as hell not going to lay the minus 300 with him, just expecting him to come through there. So parlay him, take him inside the distance. I'm not going to touch this one. That brings us to the co-main event of the evening. Islam Makhachev is facing Arman Tatskuyarian, and Arman is 13-1. He's another one of these guys that I actually was considering taking a poke on. Islam Makhachev is legit, The dude is an absolute monster. He came into the UFC with some hype surrounding him, and was it justified? Holy cow, was it justified. Islam Makhachev 16-1-0. He did slip up about five fights back. He got caught by Adriano Martins back in 2015, but you know what? He hasn't slipped up since. He does a real good job of controlling where the fight takes place. He's good on the feet. He's good on the mat. He's got TKOs. He's got submissions. This dude is really legit everywhere. He's looking like a legitimate prospect at lightweight. And this kid, Arman Tatsarian, is filling in as a last-minute replacement. He's also looking like he's relatively legit, but you don't want to start your career against a guy like Islam Makhachev. Let me tell you why. First and foremost, you're probably not going to win. This is a massive mountain to climb. This is a massive first test for your UFC fight. And if you do manage to pull it off, if you do manage to win this fight, you're already in the deep end. Every single fight that you're ever going to have after this is going to be in the top 10 or the top 5 of the division because you stepped in and beat a guy like Islam Makhachev. It's just a bad spot for Arman. And even though he may be legit, I think he's going to take his loss here. He's going to make his short-term debut with the UFC. That's going to get him into the UFC. He'll get an easier fight the second time around, and then we'll be able to look forward to betting on him in the near future. But I just think Islam Makhachev rolls here. Arman, one thing I noticed watching his fights is that he doesn't have the best takedown defense. He seems rather scrambly, almost like he doesn't have a problem putting himself in bad positions and just believes that he's got the physical attributes needed to get out of it. He doesn't defend the takedown. He'll just roll with it. He'll scramble. He'll try to get on top of his opponent. That's not going to work against a guy like Islam Makhachev. I see Makhachev controlling this entire fight from start to finish. And this is another one where, honestly, I'd say parlay it. If you want to play somebody and you want action later on, you got Islam Makhachev sitting around minus 355 right now. Way too much chalk for me to put on anybody. We never take favorites that are that big. And unless I'm confident that he's going to get it done inside the distance, I can't play a prop on him either. Makhachev wins inside the distance is plus 115. Now that sounds pretty good, taking a guy who's minus 350 and turning him into a plus 110 underdog. But this is a 3-round fight against another what appears to be legit fighter. There's a very real chance this thing goes to decision and Makhachev wins it by 3-round decision. There's also a decent chance he gets on top of the kid and pounds him out and the ref stops it. So way too many questions. We're just going to watch this one and have some fun. That brings us to our main event of the evening, Alistair Overeem versus Alexei Oleinik. And man, gotta love Overeem. Who doesn't love Overeem? This might be the most experienced single fight in MMA history. I'm not even kidding. Overeem is 44-17. That's 44 MMA wins. Oleinik has 57. He's 57-11-1. Holy crap, between the two of them, they have got over 110 UFC fights. Oh my God. The big story here is going to be Overeem's striking accuracy. He is quite literally the most accurate striker in the UFC's history. Shout out to my guy over at MMA by the Numbers. That's a real fun podcast to listen to if you're really heavy into numbers and the way they translate to betting values. MMA by the Numbers, go check him out. The dude's legit. So anyway, Alistair Overeem is the most accurate striker the UFC has ever seen. Alexei Oleinik is one of the most experienced fighters out there right now who's active and still rolling. He's 41 years old. Alistair Overeem is 38. So both of these guys are older, Alexei more so, and he's over the hump of that 40 that 40 number that we try to kind of avoid. Now, the thing with Alexei is that his road in the UFC has been interesting, to say the least. He fought Daniel Olmolanchuk and lost that one back in 2016. He has since submitted every single opponent he's faced except for Curtis Blades. Now, Curtis Blades, he's a powerful wrestler with some serious ground and pound, and Alexei is a submission guy. So Alexei ends up underneath Curtis, and Curtis pounds him until the ref saves him. So no surprise there, right? Curtis is a guy who may challenge for a title in the near future. He's a young guy. He's got a real high upside. Well, Oleinik's on his way out. Travis Brown, Victor Pesta, Junior Albini, and the legendary Mark Hunt all fell by submission to this man. And 2 of those were Ezekiel chokes. Now, any of those of you who have not done jiu-jitsu, you don't know what an Ezekiel choke is. Let me explain it to you. An Ezekiel choke is one of the only chokes that you can hit while you're underneath your opponent. And it only works on low-level grapplers. When you're in the gym and some tough new kid walks in and knows nothing about jiu-jitsu, and you let him get on top of you, or maybe he's a wrestler and he takes you down, or you accept the bottom position because you're working on your ground game, this is the choke that you use. It's one of those chokes where the only way to defend against it is to never get in it in the first place. But it's super easy not to get into, and anybody with any grappling experience will not let you put an Ezekiel choke on them. And these new kids that come into the gym, you make them look and feel really stupid when you get them with this Ezekiel choke. It takes them down a peg, which is actually really good when you're starting your jiu-jitsu career. It's really good to get knocked down a peg or two and really understand you've got a long way to go on the mat. So he got 2 of these chokes at a super high level. These guys in the UFC should freaking know better. But it's Junior Albini and Victor Pesta, 2 guys that do not have the most ring IQ in the world when it comes to UFC challengers. Mark Hunt, that's a good one. But as we noticed at the end of Mark Hunt's career, he's kind of over it. He doesn't want to fight in the UFC anymore. He really doesn't care. He just wanted out of his contract. So I'm not going to take that one completely away from Alexi, because that's a legit win to beat a guy like Mark Hunt and submit him no less. But this really wasn't prime Mark Hunt. This isn't the Mark Hunt that you really want on your record, right? Alistair Overeem, on the other hand, his only losses recently, I guess, since 2014 are to Stipe Miocic, who was the champion at the time, Francis Ngannou, who then challenged for the title and will likely be the future champion, and then also Curtis Blades, who we talked about being a title contender just a minute ago. So even in his old age, Alistair Overeem is competing with the very best in the world. He also fought Mark Hunt in 2017, and he KO'd him stiff with a knee in round 3. There's something to be said for that. Mark Hunt's chin is legendary. You can choke anybody. Literally anybody. Now, I love jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying that means it's the worst art or anything like that. But if you get on somebody's neck, you can choke anybody in the world unconscious. You can't knock everybody out. A guy like Mark Hunt does not really get knocked out almost ever. And Overeem put him out cold with a knee. He also won several decisions over Fabricio Verdum. Now, those of you who aren't familiar, Fabricio Verdum is a former UFC heavyweight champion and one of the best grapplers that MMA has ever seen. The fact that Alistair Overeem holds not 1 but 2 wins over that guy shows you that he has the smarts not to engage on the mat with somebody who's got a grappling advantage over him. He also is able to keep a fight standing on the feet against a fighter who wants to take it to the mat, and this is basically an identical matchup of that. Alexei Olenek is going to be looking to get Alistair on the ground, and I really don't think he stands much of a shot on the feet. A guy with the credentials and striking like Alistair Overeem, who fought in literally every MMA organization the world has to offer and has a belt in most of them, he's just an incredible next level striker and always has been. He understands that his chin is failing him later in his career, and he's fighting so much smarter. So the fact that he's going to be cautious when he faces off with a guy like Alexei means Alexei's probably not going to catch him with a crazy Hail Mary and hurt him. He also is not going to be able to get a guy like Alistair Overeem on the mat. I see Alistair Overeem piecing Alexei up. This fight is probably going to go 3 rounds or so. Alexei's going to be able to hang in there, but eventually Alistair is going to wear on him. The bombs that he will land from distance and range, the footwork he'll employ to keep staying on the outside, I think Alistair Overeem gets it done, and I do believe he gets it done inside the distance. So Alistair Overeem is going to close our parlay. If you remember all the way back, number 1 pick on the episode was Michael Lord. We're going to tie him up with Alistair Overeem. Alistair Overeem is sitting right now at Pinnacle at minus 231. We're going to parlay the 2 of them, and we're going to get just better than even money. We'll risk 1 unit on the first fight of the card and the last fight on the card together, and I'm pretty sure that we get that one done. Now, Alistair Overeem inside the distance is minus 175. I like that too. I honestly think you could take Lord and Overeem inside the distance, but remember, Lord's favorite line for inside the distance, or Lord's prop line for inside the distance, wasn't great either. It was about minus 150. Overeem's inside the distance is about minus 170. If you want to lay both of those two, I mean, I guess that's okay, but with the extra chalk and juice that you're laying, you're going to be putting a little over 3 units on the line to win 2 units. And if one of those loses, you're posting a negative for the evening. This way, parlaying the 2 of them, we risk 1 unit to win 1 unit. It's a lower risk, lower reward type of thing. but I'm pretty confident that it lands. Whereas I don't know that both of these guys will finish. I think they both finish. One of them could very easily win by decision and then blow up the inside the distance props. So we're going to open and close our parlay, finishing with Alistar Overeem for a nice little plus 114 price tag. That will do it for this week's episode, ladies and gentlemen. Let's recap the picks. We're going to open our night with our parlay, Michael Lord at minus 200, tied up with Alistar Overeem to wrap it up at the end at minus 231 for a price of plus 114. The second fight on the card is Shamil Abdurakhimov, plus 139. We are going to ride with Adamovsky at plus 170. We're going to take the big leap of faith on my girl, the happy warrior and the biggest nerd in the UFC, Roxanne Modafferi, at plus 300. And we're going to look like geniuses when that cashes, because everyone else is going to tell you she has no chance of winning. We're also going to take Ivan Shturkov inside the distance at minus 107. We have got 5 plays for UFC Russia, and 3 of them are big, juicy dogs. Thank you all, as always, for the love and support. You have no idea how much it means to me. And one more time, let's roll! Episode 10.